This is the Organizational Health Advantage podcast with Keith Hadley and James Felton, principal consultants at Table Group. They're in the business of coaching leaders to build strategic focus and cultural alignment that leads to amazing results. This podcast is for leaders who are looking to increase productivity and morale while decreasing politics, confusion, and unwanted turnover. Welcome to the Org Health Advantage.
Hello and welcome back to the Org Health Podcast. I'm James Felton.
And I am Keith Hadley, and we are so excited about today's guest, Hugh McCutcheon, a storied, legendary volleyball coach, gold medal winner. But I'm excited, James, about how excited you are about talking to Hugh. Tell us about his background.
Oh my gosh. Well, I've known Hugh for a while, and we actually played against each other when he was a volleyball player at BYU and I was at UC Irvine. And then he just took off in the coaching ranks. He was an assistant at BYU for their men's team. He coached overseas. He came back and was an assistant for the USA men's national team. And they got fourth when he was an assistant. And then he took over as head coach for the men's national team from 2005 to 2008. And they won the gold medal. He then coached the women after that, the women's national team, and they won the silver medal in 2012. After that, he took over the program at University of Minnesota for the women's team there. And during his, I believe it was 11 years, they went to the National Final Four 3 times, went to the Elite Eight 8 times. And so he's had a storied career in coaching. And now they've developed a unique role for him at the University of Minnesota, where he is basically an assistant athletic director in support of the rest of the coaches there. And so he's actually helping their coaches develop and become even better coaches. And I think that's a great program.
And I'm fired up about that because my parents went to the University of Minnesota. My son went to the University of Minnesota. I grew up going to those games. I can actually sing the University of Minnesota fight song, which I will not do. But let's dive in.
Thank you. Yes. So let's get after it and hear from Hugh McCutcheon. Hugh, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, James. Appreciate it.
You know, you're here and we've got Keith on the mic as well. Keith, how are you?
I'm doing great, James. Real honor to be here today and an honor to be here with Hugh.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it, Keith. Yeah. Here we go.
So Hugh, one of the things that I find remarkable in your story, and it's true with a lot of people that I know in your circle, is you played at BYU and coached at BYU. And I would say you really helped get that program on the map, by the way. And so I'm curious, what was it about Carl McGowan's coaching that spawned so many other coaches? Like, you know, I could think of about 5 right off at the top of my head, and that would probably be only, you know, a third at least of at most of how many coaches came out of there. So what was it about Carl that just inspired so many of you to become coaches?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but you're right. There were a lot of people of that generation that got into this. And, you know, I think the thing that Carl brought to it was obviously this idea of academic rigor around a teaching method in particular. Having been a model learning professor and then applying that research and those lessons learned into the realm of coaching volleyball, it was, I think, probably pretty unique and very compelling to be in a gym or in an environment where there were very clear expectations around, you know, what we were trying to do and how we were trying to achieve it. That connection maybe between process and outcome was more clearly defined. So I think for many of us, those early years, we weren't great. It got better, but we weren't very good. Sure. We were young and we didn't know what we were doing. But just the idea to be in a gym with the teaching piece of it. And then I think probably each of us, again, a little bit speculative, but each of us taking that and kind of interpreting it through our whatever coaching method or teaching method or whatever, in a way that maybe took those principles and applied them in a way that worked for us. Because I think that's, at the end of the day, that is a really important thing, that idea that there are principles that can guide this process of skill acquisition And those principles have to be, expressed through you, James, or you, Keith. You don't try to do it someone else's way, but the principles don't change. Their application does, but the principles are there. So I think that was probably part of the attraction. I think that's why a lot of people were attracted to that.
You mentioned something early that I want to double click on because we talk about it so often with our clients, and that is setting clear expectations.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that was around, how we played the game, how we behaved, how we practiced. Can you talk about how he set those clear expectations and what those were about?
Well, I think early on, when I arrived there, it was the second year that they had been an NCAA program. Yeah. And so I think most of the expectations were around skills and systems. And I think probably to Kyle's credit, we didn't know much. And so we were all trying to play catch up. I think his knowledge and maybe his idea of what he was trying to set in place was probably well and truly beyond what our capacity was at that time. But as I played for a few years and then I went away and played overseas and then came back and started coaching with him, that idea of expectations was wrapped into many more facets of the program. So it became not just skills and systems, but here's what we're trying to achieve. Here's how we're going to do that. Here's kind of a very clear path of achievement as well. So it seemed, and rightfully so, that idea of clear expectations had been wrapped around all of the program at that point.
Yeah. And I would imagine it was around behaviors, around like how we were going to, again, like our strategy, what we thought was important in terms of competing and, how we wanted to run our offense. But it was probably all encompassing, right?
Yeah, I think initially the behavioral piece was not as clearly defined. I think, during that time, there was myself and obviously Carl was running it. I was there. Troy Tanner was there, and he was a really valuable piece of the puzzle as well because of his experience with the 88 group and being a gold medalist in Seoul. Rob Browning was there for a while too, and he brought a lot of really good stuff. So there were just, possibly by circumstance, who knows, but there was just lot of really good people that were there that could add to this paradigm, I guess. I think it was not a finished product, but by the time we got into the late 90s and early 2000s, it was getting to be pretty good. I think not that it's formulaic, but we had a lot of really good things in place around all of it.
Yeah.
I don't want this question to feel like a curveball, but I always think of the coach and the team, and I assume the team means the players, and that's what everybody thinks. But what you're also describing is the team being the team of coaches. I'm just curious what you learned there about running a team of coaches by being on a team of coaches that you later translated into your head coaching. Well,
yeah, I was an assistant for Carl, and I was an assistant for Doug Beal, who coached I was part of the 2004 quadrennial in Athens. And at one point, Doug had coached the USA men to a gold medal in 1984. And I think one of the things you learn as an assistant is that you're part of something bigger than yourselves. I hope you still hold on to that when you're the head coach, actually. But this idea that you can find different ways to add value so that you can support the head coach to do their job and that, you're an integral part of it because you're a much stronger conduit between, the athletes and the head coach. I mean, and you're afforded the luxury of being able to make suggestions. You don't really have to make too many decisions. And so that's a nice space to be in too. You can say whatever you want. It's not, it's up to the head coach to kind of do it. But that communication piece, that support piece, that, learning, I got to do a ton of different things for those different coaches. And it was a great way to learn and expand and broaden my understanding of what it was to do this profession. So, yeah, it was cool. And you're part of the team within a team, no question.
Yeah. Hugh, I love that because we work with executive teams, and so often people on the executive team just get locked into their opinion, their idea, and wanting to be right and wanting their idea or opinion to be chosen and followed. And their ego sometimes gets in the way of doing what's best for the organization, or compromising, or getting on the same page about a decision that was made that they didn't come up with. It wasn't their idea. Talk about that as an assistant coach. I mean, you just brought it up. How do you, clearly you're all smart. You've mentioned some great coaches. You mentioned some great assistant coaches who all have great experience playing and coaching at high levels. Talk about bringing something to the table, committed to the idea, but then maybe not getting your way. And it's like, hey, I can just make a suggestion and I don't have to make the decision. You seem to be pretty humble about that. And what was that culture like?
Well, I think it's just the reality of the way groups should, the high functioning groups should operate. And what I mean by that is the rising tide lifts all the boats. So no one of us is going to do this alone. And even if I could, I'm going to make an assumption here, but generally within the corporate space, the next step on the ladder is supposed to lead to the next step on the ladder. So maybe there's this idea that I've got to manage up or manage down, or I've got to politic or whatever. At no point was I ever planning on being the head coach of the USA national team. I mean, that was so far beyond anything I could have ever imagined or dreamed. And so to that end, it was always about, how can I help? How can we do this? How great is it that I get to be in the room? Just that kind of stuff. And as it went on and I was afforded these opportunities, then the other stuff became a reality. But it was never like, hey, this is a stepping stone to this. It afforded me the opportunity to just be where I was and try to make it as successful as I could be. And I kind of knew, hey, if we're all successful, then that'll lead to more stuff for everyone. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think in the corporate space, we tend to get a little bit, we get so worried about our piece of the pie that we forget that we're supposed to grow the pie,
Yeah.
And the one thing that I think is really important that I've learned is that, first of all, it's not personal. We're all just trying to help the team. That's that. And if we can all trust that that's the key motive in this, then we're going to be in a good space. But one of the things we know is where everyone thinks alike, no one's thinking very much. So having agreement doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to shift the needle very much. You might just have people that are saying yes. And so there's no real value-add dialogue or interaction that can occur. So I know for me, what's most important is alignment. We want principle alignment. If we have to debate the fact that we live on planet Earth and the laws of physics apply, then we're probably not going to get very far. But if we can get past gravity and get into, okay, maybe we want to run this drill this way today, or maybe we want to do it that way, and we can debate that. I don't profess to have all the answers,
right? But
that healthy debate is good for everybody. And I think a lot of people see that as conflict, but it's not. It's just discussion. And you need that. You need that to keep pushing yourself forward and your organization. Yeah. But anyway, Keith, you were going to say.
No, I was just, as you were talking, what comes through is your joy of being in the room, and just that humility of I can't believe I'm here. And I just wonder, how have you retained that? And have you noticed other leaders that lost that and they step into the room thinking I'm all that, I should be here? I'm just curious how you see that.
Yeah, I think on to the first part of your question, I've always been about these experiences. There's never been, I've never got too wrapped up in any kind of status or whatever. I mean, I can't change my history. I own that and I'm proud of what I've got to be a part of. But it was always this idea of hey, as coaches, we're service providers, and the service we provide is trying to help this group of people to become the best they can be on the court, in the classroom, whatever it is, depending on the space that you're in. So I always took the perspective that it was never about me. It was just always up to me, as in, if we're going to do this job of coaching or leading or managing or whatever we want to call the corollary, the parallel, that the responsibility is ours. And to that end, we have to do our job. We have to help these people to become better. So the pitfall in all of this is ego, right? I mean, that's the temptation. And especially in coaching, which is so strange because, people call you coach. It's not like I go to my athletics director and call him director. Hey, Director Coyle, how are you today? I mean, it's weird. Or you go to, hey, Vice President so-and-so, what's going on in the corporate space? It just doesn't happen. And yet there's this kind of weird power and authority that gets given to coaches. Successful coaches have this kind of almost mystical quality to them. And the reality, of course, is that they're human like the rest of us. But the temptation, because that power or that status or whatever you want to call it is given, it's not necessarily earned. The temptation is that it becomes who you are versus this is what I do. Like I'm someone I'm Hugh who coaches versus I'm Hugh the coach, right? I mean, that's the pitfall. And once ego becomes involved, then it compromises the ability to play well with others. Now it's about you.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about that transition that you made. You referred to it already. You were the assistant of the men's national team under Doug Beal, and then put your hat in the ring and you get selected as head coach for the next squad from 2005 to 2008. I don't presume at all that while you were an assistant coach, you were thinking of like, okay, if I were the head coach, I'd be doing things this way. That, if you thought that, you'd share it, but clearly when you became the head coach, you made some changes, right?
Yes.
How did that evolve in your mind?
Yeah. And I'm just, as you're asking the question, sorry, my whatever look is more like, how did that all go down? Not challenging whether that was a thing. So you're right. I didn't think about being the coach of the team until very late in the quad, and even maybe talking at the Olympics in Athens, where Marv was talking to me about it, and a couple of other people, and very like, hey, you should think about doing this. And I was like, really? And so then I was trying to wrap my head around that, and thought, okay, let's look at that more closely. And you're right, it wasn't something that I just, one, thought I was entitled to, or two, I didn't take that lightly. Like, it wasn't like, I'll just go coach the national team. Why wouldn't I,
By the way, can we pause real quick there? Marv is Marv Dunphy. He coached the 88 Olympic team to a gold medal. He coached, I think, 5 national championship teams at Pepperdine. And he had worked with just about every national team and been to every Olympics with them for I don't even know how long.
Yeah.
So when he talked to you about it, that's clearly a big influence and somebody with a lot of gravitas saying you should think about this.
Yeah, it got my attention. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And then you start. Okay, well, what would that look like? And all I thought was again, okay, if you do this, one, you're afforded a chance to go to the mountaintop. How fortunate are you? I mean, not everyone gets a chance to climb that mountain. And then two, you've got to think, well, what value can I add? I mean, I guess what's the competitive advantage you could play to, or what can you do to really shift the needle? Because obviously the team was good, but the expectations were high, and we all lived in the shadows of those teams in the 80s, and for better or worse, I mean, and so it was like, well, yeah. And maybe even culturally around being the U.S. team, it's not like we're number 4. That's not what USA says. USA says we're number 1. And so you got to be driving towards that idea of like, well, how can you really get onto the podium? How can you have a chance to be the last team standing? And so as I was going through all of that, that helped kind of crystallize maybe a path forward. And when I interviewed, I didn't, because Doug knew me, obviously we'd worked together for the last 3 years. I didn't go into that interview with any presumption or any feeling of entitlement. I wore a suit, and I had a very clear plan that I'd written, and here's all the things, and tried to show him like, hey, I've got a very clear idea of how I want to do this, and these are the people I want to have involved, and these are the things we're going to need to do, and so on and so forth. So I was very serious about pursuing it once I'd made my mind up to pursue it.
I would just want to ask, was that odd? Like having to again, kind of back to my previous question of like, hey, Doug, we just worked together for 3 years, but here's my plan to do things differently.
Well, no, it was, well, first of all, it wasn't like it was reinventing the wheel. I mean, principle alignment, different application.
Okay.
But I would say, yeah, I think we should ask him, but I hope he appreciated the fact that I didn't show up in my shorts and T-shirt or my sweats, that I saw the responsibility as a very serious one. And then after I got the job, and maybe even, I'm trying to think, maybe even as part of the interview process, I was really clear about, Doug, is this, like, are you going to be, because he was going to take over as running USA Volleyball as the CEO. And so I was like, Doug, do you want me to, like, is this your team that I'm running or something? Or does it get to be my team? Like, how does it work? You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, it's our team, right? It's USA's team, but right. Are you Geppetto pulling the strings, or are you going to give me the freedom to do my job? And because I always think it's really important to managing expectations. You got to manage the expectations of the people that you work for. Yeah. And make sure there's real clarity in terms of what they want you to do. And he was great. He's like, yeah, it's your deal. I'm done. Yeah. Go for it. So it worked out just fine.
Yeah.
I'm so curious, how closely was your plan that you presented that day to what you actually ended up doing? Because sometimes the reality is far from what you plan.
I think there were a lot of things there that worked out and a few that didn't. But, one of the big things we needed to do was get out of Colorado Springs, and we were able to make that happen and get down to Anaheim. And, I had a list of people that I wanted involved, and we got a lot of those people on board. There was a definite expression of how we wanted to execute the skills and systems of the game. I think we played pretty true to that. I think the more transformative document was the mission with the team than it was necessarily the plan with Doug. But that thing ended up taking on a life. And we were saying before we got to recording the idea that when you're in an Olympic cycle, it's a 4-year thing. So your missions actually become your vision. I mean, those things become really closely aligned because the long runway you have. But yeah.
I know, James, you're eager to jump into that. I just want to double click immediately. Like, did you have like a middle of the night aha moment? Like, you know what we need? We need a mission. Or had you been thinking about that for a while? It's like, finally I can do this. Like, just walk through the clarity that you had, not with the mission, but the fact that we need a mission. And just tell us about that.
Well, we'd, at one point when I was at BYU, I went to business school and was doing an executive MBA while I was there, because initially I did a master's degree in exercise science and statistics with the idea of going on and getting a PhD and all that stuff. And then I was coaching as a means to that academic end. And then I realized coaching is actually a better fit than academia. And then I also realized coaching's a very fickle business, and we're all an ankle sprain away from unemployment. So I better have a real qualification to fall back on, so that's why I went to business school. But within that, there's a lot of talk about how to frame goals and how to do all that stuff. And certainly with Carl, there was always discussion around ways we should do that. And at that time in Utah, Covey was a big thing, and Carl had his planner like everyone else in Utah. And so the idea of trying to frame goals and create a narrative around them, create mission was not foreign. I just think with the national team, it's something that had never been, well, at least within my time there, and maybe from what I'd heard anecdotally prior to that, maybe a quad or two prior to that, it had never been as clearly articulated as we chose to do it. So what I was going through the first few months was, one, we got to take care of today because we were playing right away. But also the first year of the quad, at least at that time in the international calendar, was kind of a throwaway. There wasn't a lot going on. So not all the guys were back in the gym, at least not the best athletes at that point, or the best players maybe. And so once we got everyone back, then it seemed like it was important to just kind of frame, like, well, what are we doing here? Like, what is it enough just to say we're USA and we're going to try to be good? It just felt like we needed some clarity of purpose and intent, because what I hoped was that would lead to a trickle down in terms of the behaviors that we needed to adopt to support that.
Yeah, I know with our clients, when we mention things like mission, vision, or values, the most common response we get is the eye roll.
Yeah, it's super cringy.
So what did you do differently that made that process actually something that was valuable as opposed to cringy?
Yeah. Well, the problem is it just gets thrown around so much that it ends up being so cliche and I think the thing that gave it power, even though I would say there was a delayed return on investment in terms of understanding the power of that thing, was everyone was in the room, everyone had a voice, everyone had a chance to contribute. And then everyone signed off on it and said, yeah, this is what we're committing to. And so even that public expression of commitment to the goal and to the behaviors around it, well, that means that you have to kind of honor that. You can't say that you're trying to be the best in the world at what you do and then act against that and somehow think you're at the very least not being duplicitous. So it just became this instant accountability thing that, and I'm not saying like our lives changed right away. I mean, it was a slow burn. And in the book, one of the interviews is with Reed Priddy, who was a really good outside hitter in 2008. I think he was the best in the world in his position. But Reed would say he didn't get it until the medal was around his neck. And then he was like, oh, man, now I understand why we did all that stuff 4 years ago. So it just, I think anytime you can have clarity of intention and purpose and all that stuff, then you can build into how you're going to do that. And so figuring out the why and maybe even determining the motives, and then you can figure out the how.
Yeah. Now, just talk about your process, because in your book you kind of walk through the process, and I think a lot of leaders would say, "Yeah, well, we have a mission statement, but you did something different with yours. You didn't come in and announce it. What did you do?"
Well,
just in terms of how you formed your mission statement and where it came from.
Well,
getting the guys together at a hotel. Yeah.
We were just going to go down and play in this tournament in Brazil. Again, it was just kind of this thing that was created, I believe, America's Cup in volleyball, and down in Brazil. And we were doing our due diligence relative to this idea we were going to shift out of Colorado Springs. City of Anaheim had given us a couple of weeks to go down there and train and test it out, which was cool. So one of the afternoons, we took a day off of practice and got in a meeting room at the Anaheim Hilton and got into it. And the first thing was trying to just get the team to articulate or express what it was we were trying to do. And I was pushing very hard for the idea of we're going to try to win the Olympics. No one else was pushing for that. So, I know goals are supposed to be smart, and that was absolutely on the verge of being realistic and attainable. But it was possible. I mean, we were there. We were fourth in Athens, so it's not like we were chopped liver. We could play, but the space between being fourth and being first was pretty significant at that time. So maybe wrapped up in all of that is also the very real possibility that you may not qualify because there's 222 teams that play. One gets to go because they're the host country, and the other 11 spots you have to qualify. And we going into Athens, we beat Cuba 15-13 in the third, and it was extremely harrowing and exciting and enthralling, but it was nerve-wracking as all get out. And you're so close, you're one French fry away from 1 point here, 1 point there from 4 years going down the drain. So it's the idea that we put it out there was probably, it was a bit of a stretch. How about that?
So Hugh, a few things from your book, Championship Behaviors, that I really appreciated. One was you actually named the mission statement and the values. And why I appreciated that personally was because you probably don't remember this, but you and I had a phone call when you were with the men's national team, and you were generous with your time. I was trying to learn from you, and I said, I heard about this mission statement. Could you share what it is? He's like, and you said, well, I can tell you how we got there, but I can't share with you what it is. That's private.
Yep, that's right. Yeah. We kept it in house. Like it was, I wanted it to feel like it was ours, and it was kind of this like this sacred thing, like we got to protect it, and so we referenced it and we lived it, but no one else got to have the special sauce. We kept it in house for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I loved it. And then I also loved your interviews in the book. And, you mentioned the one with Reed, but what came out of that, what he mentioned was like, it was on the whiteboard all the time. And you folks at least pointed to it or addressed it. And so can you talk about because so many businesses do this mission and value statement and then hardly ever refer to it.
Yeah.
How integral was it for you folks?
Well, I think you're right. In the business world, it tends to be kind of an HR checklist. Right. Like, oh, we got our mission. Cool. Oh, and here's some values. Yeah, these are great words.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's about living that versus just saying that. And so even that whole idea right there, that the space between what you say and what you do has to be really small, that's what we're trying to drive. So if we're in practice and we've got on the board, hey, we're trying to be Olympic champions in 2008 and we're sucking right now, well, it doesn't feel like you're honoring that commitment. So it affords that daily reminder. I felt like, and it wasn't overt. It wasn't like it was this thing that we were, purposefully doing. We just wanted it to be a part of the deal, that it was there. And we didn't reference it every day, but it was around people could see it. We just had it on the board, just a piece of paper stuck there.
Yeah.
But what it helps to do is it helps connect intention to action. And what tends to happen when you have a mission and it's not referenced is that it becomes this vague idea of something that we hope to achieve, but we're not really connecting what we have to do today to help achieve it. And I think that idea of connecting intention to action is now more concretely expressed in this idea of the goals and the way that my conversations with Anders Ericsson were able to find this kind of model of bringing in deliberate practice concepts and how they can be applied to the day-to-day. So I've tried to build on that, but that's what it was all about, just to make sure that we didn't forget why we were there, because it's easy. We all got stuff we're worried about, but if you see it, then maybe it just pulls you back into where you need to be.
Yeah, that's so good. I'm loving this conversation. So thanks again for joining us, Hugh.
Yeah, I'm curious, Hugh, now that you're at University of Minnesota, and I don't want to switch gears away from the Olympic team because James, there's so much more to explore. But how have you been able to bring some of that philosophy there? I mean, I know now that I'm listening to you, I'm just wondering if like PJ Fleck on his day one was like, hey, what should I do? And you're like, you should come up with something really cool, like row the boat. or did he join the team knowing that he should do this? Like maybe talk a little bit about how you've been able to influence coaches.
Yeah, PJ had all his stuff coming in.
Okay.
But one of the things I wanted to be really clear about, and listen, I'm whatever 3 weeks in, so it's not like I know exactly how all this is going to play out. But one of the things I was very clear about with all of the coaches that I met is I'm not here to tell them how to do their job. Right? I don't know how to coach football or how to coach swimming or whatever, but I am here to help them do their job, and if that's as a resource in terms of skill learning, skill acquisition, skill application, or if that's about being an advocate, or if that's about being a sounding board, or I don't know, talking about recruiting or how to compete and managing the big moments and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I've had some experience, and they're different experiences, but I think it's okay to see things through a different lens, especially if it's a lens that has a consistent history of sustained success in all the different ways that success can be defined. So it's not a hard sell. I'm not in there saying, hey, you have to do it this way. I just want to get in there. And I think coaching can be a pretty lonely space for a lot of coaches. I think it can be an island, as can leadership. And so I'm more like a neutral advocate. I'm not quite admin. I'm not a coach. I'm kind of somewhere in between, where I can maybe facilitate communications on both sides, but more importantly, be a value add for the coaches, try to help them drive their success. Yeah.
And that's, by the way, after having years of success coaching the women's team at Minnesota and taking them to, was it 3 Final Fours?
Yeah.
And, and during that time, of course, a program is going to ebb and flow, but yours ebbed and flow at a really high level.
Yeah, I think we went to 8 or 9 Elite Eights, 3 Final Fours, something like that. And not again, these are, I don't know if the numbers matter other than to say, like, you can focus on process and be about excellence and you can still win, right? Because there's a tendency to get sucked into the whole thing that we got to win at all costs.
Right.
But yeah, I think over the 11 seasons, we won about 80% of our matches playing in the toughest league in the country. And we did just fine. And so again, that all I'm saying is that lends credibility to maybe there's something to this. Maybe it's not just because it would be lame if I was just, when we were in Beijing, we did this, or this time in London, or whatever, and tried to regale them with these anecdotes and of whatever I deem to be my successes. Of course, they're not. I was just a part of it, but the team was the one doing the work, right? And so that's why the book is about being a practical guide to actually doing it, not here's some cool stories about stuff that I did. That's a lame book. This thing actually, I hope, has some soul.
Yeah. As a non-coach, the easy assumption is that it's all about just having the best players. And everything you're describing is, you had great players, you had great athletes, but what you're describing is all the stuff that comes in between. It's the healthy side of leading a team or coaching a team, not just we call this smart side.
Well, and to that end, talent matters in sport, no question, as I imagine it does in business. You can't win the Derby on a donkey, right? You need some thoroughbreds. And to that end, that talent, as you get further up, I use this analogy of food chains, but as you get further up the food chain, everyone's an apex predator now. So being taller or faster or stronger or whatever, that's not a differentiating factor. That's no longer a competitive advantage. That's just the lay of the land. And so what I've found is that technical mastery is, that idea of fundamental skill repeatability becomes this massive deal. And when you add to that, being able to apply the mental game, being able to be a good teammate, make those around you better, all that kind of stuff. Now all of a sudden you're starting to create some synergies around stuff other than talent. But oftentimes the narrative is, hey, if you've got talent, that's enough. But it's not. Talent's not that rare. There are lots of people, and you'll find them any number of places, that'll tell you how good they could have been.
Yeah. Well, that's a little bit like executives saying they're really smart. And it's like, the executives at your competitors are really smart too, so what's going to make us different here?
And James, we talk about this a lot. We have lots of clients that they're just constantly trying to hire the best and brightest from the best business schools, from the best consulting firms, from the best, analysts, and we see them struggle as much as everybody else. Like, you got a really smart team. They're really gifted. They have the best degrees. What we don't know is, can they actually work together? Can they become cohesive? Can they be clear? Can they be aligned? Will they make sacrifices for each other?
Yeah. This goes along something else I wanted to ask you about, Hugh, which is like what oozes out of the book during those interviews that you have. I just love them, is this humility on the team and of those players. And I remember, like, you afforded me the opportunity, again, you probably don't remember this, but when you were training with the women's team, national team in Miami, and I was coaching a high school group club, you allowed us to come in and watch your practice. And then after the training was over, the team came over and talked to our players, and it was just super cool. And they were going out of their way to connect with our kids, and then in this book, it's like, Reed Pretty or Loy Ball or any of the players in there, you were praising them for some like mental evolution or, a change in their thought process or a change in, how they were going to lead. And they didn't really take it. And instead they like praised you for your leadership, and you didn't really take it. You praised it. And just how did you go about like building that culture of humility within the teams that you led?
I don't even know if that's a word I've ever used to describe it. Although I understand why you're saying that. I guess from maybe it feels or it felt more like gratitude or respect or something like that, to the point where, the interviews, I really liked adding that layer, because it felt, again, if I was just going to tell you from the coach's side of it, well, that's only half the story. I thought it would be compelling to see how those things were received, or those messages or those ideas, right?
Yeah.
But, well, let's look at Riley, right? Riley and emotional control.
Yeah.
He was one of the most important players for us in that 2008 campaign.
Yeah.
And he took some phenomenal swings and both like big time cuts, and just super smart, cagey, just being a smart volleyball player. And, who he was in Athens, maybe even into 2005, 2006, and then who he was in 2008. I mean, he just came such a long way. And for anyone to make that kind of change, it requires a high degree of trust. So I'm just always grateful that they trusted me enough to make those changes, because they could have been like, hey, screw you, whatever. You're a random guy from New Zealand. What do you know? Right. But instead they were like, hey, no, I can see it. And let's work through it together. So that's why I'm always trying to express it from that perspective. And I think, again, maybe it's better to ask them, but it feels like a lot of times when I'm with those guys, just the fact that I was prepared to meet them where they were and see them as people, not just as competitive commodities, and try to invest in their development, not just in their skill development, but try to help them around the game, not just in the game. Maybe they felt there was something to that. And connected to that was this idea of like, hey, we're really going to try to do something great. And even though there were tons of ebbs and flows, right? There were all kinds of ups and downs. Once we got grooving, I mean, it was pretty cool. We were pretty good. And I think it's safe to say we were the best team in the world in 2008. Like, I don't think it was a blip. I mean, we just won World League and we were doing pretty good. So yeah, it was kind of cool to go through that journey and then come out the other end and feel like we'd actually achieved what we set out to do. So to your question, it feels like there was just a really good amount of, respect and we're in it together and we're connected and we're doing all that stuff. And so however that gets expressed, I don't know. I want to tell them how great they are, and maybe they want to tell me I did an okay job too.
Yeah. Along a similar line, I think one thing I'm super curious about is when you started coaching with Karch Karai.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know, Karch is probably like the Michael Jordan of USA volleyball, and won 2 Olympic indoor gold medals, won a outdoor beach gold medal, and just an amazing player.
Yeah.
And he was your assistant.
Yep.
And what was that like for you? That seems like it would be intimidating, but what about Karch made it easier for you?
Well, I think it could have been, you're right. Had we not won the gold, maybe it could have been more intimidating, but at least we were able to connect on that level. And there is certainly a humanity to Karch that's real. And, he could understand better than most the magnitude of what we'd achieved. And so I think that probably earned some respect from his side. And as you said, his resume is fairly impressive as well. So there's a lot to respect there. And I think when you start from that position of mutual respect, then it's easier to move forward. But I don't think there was a ton of ego involved in either side of it. And he was very clear about, hey, I get it. I did these things as a player. I'm still learning to figure out what it is to do this whole coaching thing. And I just thought that it was important to have someone that had been so instrumental in the growth of the game in our country and who had expressed such a strong interest in coaching. to try to give it a shot.
Yeah. We often deal with, as I said earlier, like executives who, have a pretty strong opinion and tie a lot of their ego is tied up in like what they've accomplished and the function they lead. And meaning like, okay, I've led this department or this function. I've done it well. I have some gravitas. My influence should be greater. And there's nobody who had, could have had more of an ego in your world than Karch. And yet he was still like super open-minded, curious, and checked his ego at the door. It seemed you would know more, but
no, it was, there was learning and there was ebb and flow like everything else, but it was always like, hey, we're trying to win a gold. Now we're trying to win a gold medal in London. And again, clarity of purpose. And I thought it was great. We worked hard and we did our best. And it's unfortunate we couldn't. We got a silver and we were number one in the world at that time. And we'd won the last 3 Grand Prix and we'd beaten Brazil the last 6 times we played them. So we weren't able to beat them 7 times out of 7. It's a bummer, but there you go. It's not like we were chopped liver. It was a good run. And, I was certainly happy that he was able to keep it going and obviously again, express it in his way, do his thing, no problem. But it's been great. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Keith, I've kind of been taking over. So what question? I know you're chomping at the bit.
No, this is good. I mean, Hugh, we often say to leaders that, there's a phrase that we use that the best leaders have a leadership philosophy and they can teach it to others. And maybe you've thought of it in those terms. I mean, you wrote a book about it, but if you could just summarize and maybe a couple of what are the top phrases that comes to mind? How would you capture your leadership philosophy that you've tried to teach others?
One of the definitions of leadership that I express in the book that I like is this idea that it's authentic influence that creates value. Right? Kevin Cashman says that, and I like that. The idea of authentic, because you got to be you, right? To thine own self be true, and just that idea that you're adding value, that you're there to make things better than you found them. I think that's important. We all want to leave it better than we found it. For me personally, having had the privilege of working with all of these different populations at different levels, I think the main leadership idea or lesson is that it's up to the leader to figure out how to make it work. I think there's a tendency as the leader to get or subscribe to something a little more dictatorial in terms of your methodology. And I think what probably is a more effective way is to meet people where they're at and here are these principles I know I'm going to apply. But for example, I've been coaching college women and at one point I coached college men, but let's use college women. So I'm in moderate age. They're 18 to 21. The idea that somehow, they're going to have the emotional range or the capacity or the bandwidth to adapt to whatever it is I want to do. Well, it's unlikely. Now, I'm not going to be an 18-year-old female either, but I can certainly, I've got more range to figure out how to connect with them on their terms than somehow mandating that they connect with me on my terms. So and I don't think that's anything other than kind of a bend, don't break thing, where you can find ways to connect and find points of connection with them versus waiting for them to figure it out and come to you. So I don't know if that's wrapped up in adaptive leadership or that idea that we're here to as a service provider, which to me is different than servant leadership. Service provider is, hey, I'm here to help you get the job done. We all have to do it together. And this is what I can do to help you. I can, it's like I got a toolkit and I can use different tools in different ways with different people. Right. So that's the idea versus like, hey, I got a hammer and every one of you better be a nail.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. We meet so many leaders who are half of a leader. And meaning they know how to be decisive. They know how to have high expectations. They know how to be demanding, but they don't have the ability to, ask questions and learn and be curious and meet people where they're at and be adaptable. And so I really appreciate your just modeling what that looks like to be two sides of a leader And it strikes me that that's something that has just been almost effortless for you as the work is hard, but the style of leadership seems like it's just an outflow of who you are as a person. And that's super,
I don't
super
know enough
helpful.
to know, Keith. It just made sense to me. Like, it just seemed really logical. And it worked all right. So I just kept with it,
That's great. Well, this is probably a good time to wrap, but hey, Hugh, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure, and we really appreciate your time and wish you all the best with the book and the influence that book will have, and also all the best in your new role at University of Minnesota.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure to talk with you both.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
There you go. Go Gophers. Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Org Health Advantage. Your hosts, Keith and James, are helping leaders change the world of work and invite you to share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. For more resources on building stronger teams and organizational health, check out tablegroup.com.
Produced by Audavita Studios. Connect your voice to the world.